Welcome to this presentation on giving presentations and leading discussions. To start off here in this presentation about ways we can deliver effective group presentation, first of all, to do an effective job is to consider the nature of your participants. So really get to know your group, understanding who they are, as we talked about in the earlier presentations when we did the assessment of needs and finding out what your participants' backgrounds are, their ages, their interests, what experiences they have already had. This can bring good understanding for you to help you develop an effective and really good presentation or even discussions as you prepare to lead that. So knowing your group is really critical at the beginning of a presentation or discussion that you're leading. As you get to know your group, you want to make it personal. So those people that are attending, they'll be attentive if they think you're going to address the questions that matter most to them. And until these questions, their questions, are answered to their satisfaction, they'll have difficulty relaying information you're trying to get across. So you really want to make it personal to the needs that they have. And that's why doing the needs assessment at the beginning is so critical to helping you tailor what we talked about with the case studies and things like that, or the case material that you can use. Understand why you're there. Have you been invited to speak as an expert or consultant? Are you there as an intermediary? Or are decision makers telling the group that they've got to have this training, so they brought you in? But if you've been invited by the whole group and they're excited that you're there, obviously you can see the attitude of the group will be different. So understanding and knowing why you're there, is this a mandated training or is this volunteer, an opportunity for you to be there? Or is it a part of a training course to a certificate or a skill set that the group needs? Understanding why you're there is critical, and then speak their language. Avoid jargon or unfamiliar terms, slangs, and that sort of thing. That might confuse people or prevent your message from getting through. And there again, just provide the case materials that you have, examples that can relate to the audience you're working with in this specific training program that you're working on. As you organize your presentation or discussion that you're going to lead, make sure you have an effective opening. A good opening will help the rest of your presentation go much more smoothly. It's that opportunity where you can win the audience over to your side, whether it's cracking a joke that is appropriate to your presentation, or you're polling the group, or you're just identifying with them with your background and things like that. If you had experience in the same fields that they're in, for example, it's also good to share. All those types of things can help you build that effective opening. Stories can do that as well. Provide a preview of information prior to an explanation. So really, just like an overview, and then say, we'll now unpack this a little bit more, and we'll go in a little bit more depth here. Third, you can cover a few points of information thoroughly rather than a bunch of points incompletely. So set the limits on how much you plan to cover and stick to it as much as you can, because if you go off on rabbit trails too much, it's going to hurt you there. And that's point number 5. Just avoid tangents and getting off track. You want to organize the information with a step-by-step logical sequence for your participants. It helps them to more easily follow where you're going instead of kind of in a maze and they're trying to figure it out. And it's all like a mystified process for them, for the audience to try and have to figure it out. So if you can have your things in a logical sequence, your points, it makes it much more beneficial for your audience to pay attention. Talked about having tangents and rabbit trails, signaling transitions between information. So use the information, say, okay, we've looked at this, and then make that as a transition, a segue into now maybe you want to understand a restatement of the first point. So we looked at 5 of these different ways to organize a presentation, starting with making your opening effective, to the point now where we're signaling transitions here at point 6 between the information. You see how that works? So now you're transitioning into point 7 as we look at the next one. The next point here as we transition. So be as specific as possible in your discussion and in your presentation on your points. So the clearer the message is for your participants to understand. Try to avoid long sentences in your bulleted points or in your main point. For example, try to make it as specific as you can. That just increases the likelihood your audience will understand what you're trying to convey. Provide brief pauses at appropriate times during presentations. This gives your audience an opportunity to interact if they need to, or take time to just process information. If you say consider, and then you consider this thought, and then you go right on to your next point after that, you don't pause for a couple of seconds to allow them to consider something. You see, you kind of lost the point there. So use of pause is a skill that will come with experience. And so I just encourage you in that area to continue to practice and develop that skill. And then review. Allow participants to recap the information frequently. So it helps save information for later, kind of like reviewing your points as you're going through. We looked at this in the first point, when we looked at this as the second, and now we're moving on to the third point, and then into the fourth. And the final point here is we wrap things up. Just some ideas here to help you as you organize your presentation. It's not what you say, but how you say it. This is really critical here to talk about. And so your body language, what you're putting off to the audience, if your hands are crossed and your arms are crossed, your body can be more in a stance, a closed attitude. It can kind of convey that you're kind of closed off, and your audience will feel that and feed off of that. Sometimes it's better if you establish your comfort level with the group through natural and positive body language. Maintain good posture and a firm stance as you address your group. Avoid putting hands near your mouth or your face, or kind of those nervous twitches you might have. Maybe you're rubbing your hair a lot, or your face, or a pen, or playing with your ring on your finger. Those types of gestures just signal that you're insecure. So watch out for those bad habits like fidgeting and tapping a pencil or clicking a pen, something like that. That will just distract your participants from what you're trying to convey to them. So just be careful there. Again, it's a confidence level in your material. If you know your material, you're less likely to have that kind of nervous energy because you feel like you're lacking confidence. We're going to talk specifically about facilitating a lively discussion. Some of the things you can do, sort of a top 10 list, I guess. Some things you can do to help lead the group. Paraphrase. Paraphrase what someone has said so the participants know that they've been understood and other participants can hear. And sometimes this is really critical if you're in a large room and sound quality is bad or people have a hard time hearing. People can't hear in different places, so sometimes it's good to paraphrase. It also helps earlier, like I said, that the participant realizes they've been heard. And then check your understanding against the words of a participant. You know what they're saying when you lead the discussion. Compliment an insightful comment or something that was interesting that you hadn't considered before, or that they've provided some really good feedback to the group. And then elaborate on a participant's contribution, if it really makes a good contribution, like in the sense with examples, or suggest a new way to view a problem. And that just really helps build the energy of the group, and then people feel that they are really contributing. Energize a discussion by quickening the pace. You can use humor any way necessary. Prod the group to make more contributions. For example, okay, what else? What's somebody else's opinion? What else does someone think? And when you disagree, do it gently with the participants' comments to stimulate further discussion. Like, well, that's not really what we're looking for, but let's talk about it. Maybe rephrase your discussion question that maybe you were off a little bit in your presentation and things were misunderstood. So you want to just maybe give them the benefit of the doubt there. Mediate differences of opinion between participants that are in your group, and just make sure to help relieve any tensions that may be brewing. Say we allow freedom of expression, so not everybody's going to agree with everyone, but we don't want to be on personal attacks with one another. And then pull together the ideas, showing the relationships to each other, and then change. Change the process by altering the method that people participate in. Like you've seen in some of the courses we've done voice threads where you'll actually do audio or video where you record your comments, and then in the old analog discussion thread where you're typing, keyboarding in your answers. But there's also some times when you'll be in a live environment where students will be in a synchronous environment where they'll maybe raise their hand, their avatar or something, an icon will ding the feature so that the moderator is being aware that there's someone that wants to speak, just like it would be in a live situation where people might raise their hand. And then finally, summarize and record, if you want to, the major views of the group. That might be able to help your group kind of understand the holistic idea of why you were there that day and your overall point. Summarize where you had the group and had decided on a certain area on the holistic side of the discussion. That might be helpful for the whole group, and really it'd be a very good thing for them to kind of see where they have ownership of what happened that day in your presentation.